This episode of Distraction is sponsored by Landmark College, offering 360-degree support for students with learning disabilities, ADHD, and ASD. Learn more at lcdistraction.org. Landmark College. We teach differently. Hello, this is Dr. Ned Hallowell for Distraction. Welcome to today's show. We are going to do one of my favorite things today. We're going to devote the entire show to your questions. Please keep sending your questions in. It gives me a chance to do this thing that I love to do, which is to read your questions and then try to answer them. And just so you know, I don't read these in advance. I read them on the air for the very first time. And so what you hear is my fresh take. And I do that on purpose. I think there's a value to hearing, my initial response, even if it's something like, I don't know. I think there's a real value to getting the fresh take, to getting my honest response. We've been getting a lot of questions mailed in, which is just wonderful. So let's get started. Our first question today comes for a listener by the name of John. He writes, I've been listening to your podcast since, I started reading Driven to Distraction only 8 years after it was suggested that I read it, and that's not uncommon, an 8-year lag time. People with ADD sort of take their time. Reading Driven to Distraction made me decide to actually address the negative ways my ADHD was impacting my life and use it to my benefit. I finally had an excuse/explanation for why I did the things I did, why I acted the way I did, why I felt the way I did, and so forth. I started taking meds, tried Vyvanse and Adderall XR, and then landed on regular Adderall, made Dean's List for the School of Engineering at UConn with 3.8 GPA the very next semester. This was a miracle, I thought, and paid no more attention to my diagnosis or potential side effects of my meds. I am now a manufacturing engineer, an engineering manager, and constantly get interrupted and distracted from my work. My Adderall used to work well to let me get back on track, but recently I feel like it really hasn't been working like it did. I'm also concerned that it may have led to and or worsened some of my symptoms and bad habits that seem to be common for ADHD or undiagnosed ADHD, including heavy drinking and increased anger, which drove my wife to leave and almost destroyed our marriage. Do you know if there is any evidence research that reflects my feelings on that interaction? Well, you can't expect the medication to do everything. And the environmental problems, the medication won't take care of. So limiting interruptions is really something that you need to address by setting up boundaries. You need to, and this is a problem in virtually every workplace you can find. That's where you as an engineer need to do some environmental engineering. The medication will help you focus, and to that extent, it'll help you create these boundaries. But you need to create the boundaries to reduce interruptions, and as you reduce interruptions, you'll reduce frustration, which will reduce irritability, which will reduce your drinking, which will improve your marriage, which will increase your ability to perform at work. So you'll have a positive spiral in the right direction. It all comes back to creating an environment that allows you to perform at your best. Okay, our next question is about ADHD in the workplace and comes from Debbie in Massachusetts. She writes, quote, I am responsible for coordinating accommodations for employees. I am working with an employee who has ADHD and anxiety. She's requested accommodations to telecommute to minimize office distractions. The concern is, given her job is to coordinate communication strategies and messaging, she must be accessible to collaborate, engage, and interact with the team. Since she is trying to minimize distractions, she's very standoffish with her team. Teammates feel they cannot reach out and engage her. Any suggestions? Well, I think she needs to explain the situation. I think she needs to identify their concern. They're feeling she's standoffish. So she needs to say, I'm trying to minimize distractions, and so I can seem standoffish, and then explain to them why she's seeming that way. And then once they understand what she's doing, they'll probably understand. You gain a lot once you explain what you're doing. Then they'll understand she's trying to deal with what's going on her end, and she's really not being standoffish. All right, this next one comes in from Rob all the way in Ireland. He writes, I was finally diagnosed with ADHD just before Christmas, and I'm 22 years old. I'm just wondering if you have experience with differences in opinion from different countries on ADHD. From what I've seen, there is a severe lack of knowledge about ADHD in Ireland. Anything I learned about the disorder came from American sources online. When I was growing up, I didn't know if anyone else in the entirety of my school had ADHD. I suspected I had it myself, but honestly, I never brought it up with any teachers because there was never any indication they were aware of its existence. As a teenager, I was not going to try to come to my teachers with what amounted to a self-diagnosis and say, hey, I think I have this obscure thing that has never been mentioned. If I was wrong, it would look like I was grasping for an excuse for laziness. I wasn't going to take that chance. That and the fact that I was very polite, well-behaved, and engaged in class. I just got very, very good at hiding my shortcomings. I didn't fit the stereotypical ADHD disruptive loud. I think it's important to bring this up in discussion. It outlines how the internet can be so helpful to people in countries that might be doing less, or could just be doing things in a way that isn't as effective. Well, you're so right, Rob. Outside of the United States, most countries are like Ireland. Most countries don't recognize it. They really think they're stuck in what I call the moral diagnosis. You're lazy, you're willful. They refer to ADHD, if they've even heard it, as an American invention. They scoff at it. They say, these kids just need to shape up. They need more discipline. They need more beatings. They need more stiff upper lip. Gradually, that backward attitude is receding, but you still find it prevalent around the world. I've been invited to China to serve as a consultant, and I'm thrilled that they're finally beginning to embrace and welcome the more enlightened approach, because it has a strong scientific foundation to it, that this is not laziness. This is not a moral weakness. This is a medical diagnosis that really can save lives, change lives. And it's a shame that you felt you couldn't bring it up because you'd be ridiculed. You're absolutely right. Most countries lag behind, and kids live in fear of bringing up what should be identified by enlightened schools, enlightened teachers, enlightened parents. We'll get there, but we're not there yet. People like me and many others are doing their best, but it'll take a while. Okay, we got a really nice email from a woman named Triesta who asked, I'm wondering how Dr. Hallowell ever made it through Harvard back when there weren't the resources that are now available. Is there a point where the emotional scarring from bad experiences in academic environments becomes something that one simply can't recover from? Well, I was really lucky. One of the many reasons I believe in God, I never had a bad teacher. I really lucked out. I honestly never had a bad teacher. And I had many gifted teachers, many wonderful, wonderful teachers, from my first grade teacher, Mrs. Eldridge, through Mr. Cook in the 5th grade, Mr. Slocum in 6th grade, Mr. Gibson in 8th grade, Mr. Jacobus in ninth grade, Mr. Plugstra in 11th grade, Mr. Tremolo in 12th grade, Bill Alford in college, Walter Jackson Bate in college, and on and on. I mean, just wonderful, wonderful teachers in residency, Leston Havens, Irv Taubey, Doris Benarin, Thomas Gutile. I love naming them because they put a lump in my throat. These people just made me, shaped me, and I owe them the world. So that's how I was able to grow and thrive. I was lucky enough to have a high IQ. That's helpful. But it was really the luck of having had these angels called teachers. And for some people who aren't so lucky, yes, they can be severely scarred. And that's why schools can break people, who have ADHD and dyslexia like me. I was one of the lucky ones. I was one of the ones who was blessed to have wonderful, wonderful teachers who were able to unwrap my gifts instead of punish me and shame me. Hopefully we'll get to a world where everyone has their gifts unwrapped. Okay, here's a question now from a mom who asked for some help with her 11-year-old son. She writes, "My son was diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia 2 years ago, and now he's 11, taking 5 milligrams, lowest dose of Adderall XR. It helps him with focus at school, but he's starting to lose some weight. I give him big lunches, which he doesn't always eat, protein, chocolate, milk, big breakfasts, and lately tons of desserts. He's a lean boy as it is, but now is looking even skinnier. He's tried all the stimulants, and Adderall XR is the only one where he doesn't have as many negative side effects. He doesn't seem to be as happy as he used to be. I can't tell if it's hormones, general moodiness of an 11-year-old boy, or if it's the medication and he's having a rebound effect. His doctor and I are keeping a close eye on him. If we do have to take him off the medication due to weight and possible rebound effect, what other medication can he take, since he has already tried Concerta, Focalin, Vyvanse, and dextroamphetamine? Short-acting Adderall at the lowest dose gives him a different effect than Adderall XR. In fact, if I just give him a quarter of a 5 milligram, he tells me he feels nervous and very aware. It's not easy to see that. What are medication options? I'm getting anxious of running out of options to help him focus at school. He is a sweet, smart, funny boy, and I would say his ADHD is on the lower scale of the spectrum. He just doesn't seem happy and often will say he's sad or depressed. Or is it just being 11? I'm finding it difficult to find a balance for him on a physical and emotional level. Well, medication is not for everybody. It'll help, and by help I mean improve target symptoms with no side effects. It'll help about 80% of people. But that means 20% it doesn't help or causes side effects. And your son may be one of those people like me who just can't tolerate medication. And then you rely on the non-medication interventions, coaching, physical exercise, meditation, nutrition, getting enough sleep, structure. If you use all of those, you can get a result certainly on a par with medication. In addition, you haven't tried the non-stimulants, which would include Wellbutrin, Strattera, guanfacine. The non-stimulants, you might get a result on a par with the stimulants. So my 2 suggestions would be to try the regimen that I just outlined of non-medication interventions, physical exercise, meditation, nutrition, coaching, structure, make sure you get enough sleep, and then consider the non-stimulant medications like Wellbutrin, Strattera, guanfacine, and consider both of those options, knowing that stimulant medication is not for everyone. Well, again, thank you for these questions. Please keep sending in the questions. We really rely on them. It's hard to reach out for help, but it's important. Lots of our listeners are struggling with the same issues you wrote in about. So this is the perfect forum to ask questions not only for yourself, but for them as well. Everyone benefits in our entire distraction community when you ask a question. So if you have a question you'd like me to answer in a future episode, please send it to us at connect@distractionpodcast.com. That's connect@distractionpodcast.com, or call and leave a message for us at 844-55-CONNECT. That's 844-55-CONNECT. Distraction is produced by Collisions, the podcast division of CRN International. Collisions, podcasts for curious people. Our producer is Sarah Gurton, the marvelously talented Sarah Gurton. Our sound engineer today is Greg Session, and our music theme is created by the invisible Mark Berman.